Let me start this video with something every XRP and crypto holder needs to hear. This is a sensitive topic and is definitely not something I am excited about. Everyone talks about utility, CBDCs, institutional adoption, ETFs, but nobody's talking about the part that actually matters when all of that becomes real. What happens to you when your government decides your XRP sitting on cold wallets is not just a speculative asset anymore, but a taxable, traceable, and reportable digital liquid instrument, a liquidity provider. That's what we are about to become for the banks. Because right now, at a global scale, things are moving very quickly. So let me ask you something serious, because if you get this part wrong right now, it might not be just a temporary mistake. It can follow you, the crypto holder, for the rest of your life. Just imagine XRP hits mass adoption. Imagine banks start using the XRP ledger as a global settlement mechanism. Imagine XRP becomes a financial instrument that plays a pivotal role in the new financial system. You wake up tomorrow and your government demands a full report of every single crypto wallet that you own. You might say, but my wallets are anonymous. Well, the whole point of blockchain technology was indeed to make every single transaction traceable. And the only way to stay truly anonymous was by holding physical cash. We are moving into a world where that option disappears and suddenly everything becomes visible. They don't need to physically seize your XRP. They don't even need access to your seed phrase. They don't need to hack your ledger or treasure. In fact, they know they can't do that. What they can do instead is much more powerful. They can redefine your relationship with your own assets. They can legally require full reporting of every wallet you've ever created. They can punish mistakes retroactively. They can classify movements between your own wallets as taxable events. They can require disclosures that become permanent, legal, and enforceable. And all of this can happen without touching a single coin you own. Self-custody protects the asset, but it doesn't protect the owner. That's the part nobody wants to think about, but every XRP holder needs to face head-on. And here's the uncomfortable truth most people refuse to process. The tools governments are building right now are specifically designed for global surveillance, cross-jurisdictional tax coordination, automatic reporting, and identity-mapped blockchain activity. They aren't guessing. They aren't theorizing. They're implementing. The AC8 framework in Europe is the clearest example, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. Let me paint the picture for you. Under AC8, virtually every crypto service provider globally, custodial wallets, exchanges, and yes, even some DeFi protocols are required to collect and share detailed information about their European users. Wallet addresses, balances, flows, identities, everything. This means that even if you're not in Europe, if the service you use has European exposure, your data gets swept into the system, and the psychological shock is coming. People are used to crypto freedom. They think anonymity is the default. They think because a wallet has no name attached to it on the blockchain, it cannot be tied back to them. That illusion is rapidly evaporating. The technology governments are building is designed to close the loop between digital identity and digital movement. And with the rise of digital IDs, CBDCs, tax-integrated blockchain analytics, and financial compliance automation, every wallet activity becomes visible in a way that the average crypto holder is not prepared for. This isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to prepare you. We're watching countries around the world move aggressively. Spain is taxing crypto up to 47%. Germany is working to eliminate long-term tax exemptions. Italy implemented a straight 26% rate. The UK demands AML disclosures and proof of funds for suspicious movements. Canada recently increased capital gains inclusion. Israel taxes almost all crypto as income. And the G20 with the OCDE are literally building standardized wallet to identity mapping guidelines. This is not random. This is not isolated. This is coordinated. You are watching crypto become part of the regulated global financial system. And with that integration comes a level of oversight and obligation that most retail investors have never experienced. The biggest mistake XRP holders make is believing that a cold wallet is a shield. It is a shield, but it's only a shield for the coins, not for the person. Governments don't need your private key to legally hold you accountable. They only need rules, definitions, and reporting obligations. And many of those obligations are already here. When XRP becomes a core liquidity instrument for banks and institutions, which is exactly what many of us expect, governments will not treat your holdings like speculative tokens. They will treat them like digital financial instruments tied to taxable, reportable, and regulated activity. And once that classification is in place, everything changes for the owners who are unprepared. This is why wealthy individuals never leave high V-value assets sitting on personal wallets under their own identity. They use structures, companies, foundations, trusts, legal entities that stand between them and the asset, not because they're hiding anything, but because they understand how the world works. A wallet protects the coins. A legal structure protects the person, the wealth, the inheritance, and the future. And this is exactly why I took action personally. I'm currently in Cyprus establishing my tax residency, and every high net worth crypto holder I've met here has some form of structure in place. Not because they're paranoid, not because they are doing something shady, but because they understand that as crypto becomes part of the global financial ecosystem, exposure becomes a liability unless you build a protective legal shield around your assets. This is where things get even more interesting. Most people don't know that wallet certification even exists. A wallet certificate is a legal document issued by a lawyer confirming the wallet belongs to you. The funds were acquired legally, and they can be used to fund a structure, a company, or major financial movements without any red flags. This is how the wealthy move crypto into the real world. Real estate purchases, large off-ramps, corporate funding, asset transfers. Banks don't accept screenshots or casual blockchain explorers. They need legal verification. And now that XRP is rapidly approaching real-world integration at institutional levels, retail holders who sit on meaningful positions need to understand how to protect themselves before laws tighten even further. The more you understand how this new ecosystem is forming, the more you realize that crypto investors aren't preparing for the right threat. Most people are still operating with a 2017 mindset. They think the danger is exchanges collapsing or losing their seed phrase or hackers breaking into their wallets. Those risks are real, but they're not the existential threat anymore. The existential threat is regulatory exposure. Your name tied directly to digital movements in a financial system where governments, institutions, and tax authorities are all interconnected. And once XRP becomes a globally integrated settlement asset, the stakes rise dramatically because your holdings stop being just tokens. They become part of the circulatory system of the new financial world. And the real shift happens when governments no longer treat crypto as a niche asset for traders, but as a legitimate regulated financial instrument. Once that line is crossed, the entire environment around your XRP changes. You're no longer just holding crypto. You're holding something that governments classify, monitor, and evaluate with the same seriousness as corporate assets or large capital flows. That's when retroactive investigation becomes a tool. That's when movement between your own wallets can be treated as taxable. That's when your identity becomes tied to any on-chain activity you ever made, even from years ago. Think about how governments operate today. They don't chase individuals one by one. They create systems that do the chasing automatically. Automated data matching, AI-driven financial pattern analysis, mandatory disclosures, cross-border reporting systems, a PIS between tax authorities, blockchain explorers upgraded with identity overlays. This is the future being built right now, and it's being designed to plug into the very networks that XRP will empower. Just look at what's already in motion. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development's Crypto Asset Reporting Framework, KAF, essentially turns every crypto service provider into a reporting entity. That means exchanges, custodians, payment providers, and even certain DeFi interfaces will be required to share identity-linked data with tax agencies around the world. Then you have travel rule compliance, KYC/AML expansions, and digital identity programs designed to unify your passport tax ID and crypto activity under a single integrated profile. When you combine all of this with the increasing adoption of CBDCs, the global financial grid starts to look very different. It becomes automated, coordinated, transparent, not for you, but for the institutions monitoring you. And this brings us to the deeper point. Real adoption is not only a technological shift, but a political one. Governments have no intention of allowing trillions of dollars to flow through crypto ecosystems without regulatory capture. They're not against crypto itself. What they're against is unmonitored capital movement. So as XRP continues moving toward its real purpose, becoming a neutral liquidity layer for global settlement, the spotlight on XRP holders becomes brighter, especially on those with meaningful positions, especially on those without structures, especially on those whose entire portfolio sits on one cold wallet that is directly associated with their name, their IP address, or their KYC exchange history. People underestimate how much data connects them to their wallets. Exchanges log your withdrawals. Wallet providers collect metadata. Your internet provider logs your traffic patterns. Your device fingerprints your signatures. And even if none of that existed, blockchain analytics firms have become so advanced that multi-hop tracing is trivial. They map patterns, amounts, timings, behaviors. They don't need your name to know it's you. They need enough overlap, and most people create that overlap without even realizing it. And here's the real issue. Once regulators classify your movement as income or business activity or unexplained capital flow, the burden of proof falls on you. That's where unstructured holdings become dangerous. Not because your wallet can be touched, but because you can be forced to justify your activity under legal frameworks you never prepared for. That's why wealthy individuals use companies, foundations, or international structures, because the asset is no longer held personally. It's held by a legal entity. That changes the classification. That changes the tax treatment. That changes the risk. That changes the exposure. And most importantly, it creates a separation between the person and the asset that governments legally recognize. This separation matters more than ever when XRP becomes a core settlement asset. Because the moment XRP starts flowing between central banks, institutional payment networks, and global liquidity hubs, every jurisdiction will want their share of regulation, reporting, and taxation. They won't care whether you self-custody or not. They won't care if your funds sit on a ledger nano. They will care how you classify those funds under their laws. That's the part that blindsides unprepared holders. Let me give you a real-world example. Imagine you decide to off-ramp $500,000 worth of XRP during a bull run. In the old days, you could simply sell it on an exchange and withdraw to your bank. Today, banks treat any large incoming crypto-related transfer as high risk. They want documentation. They want source of funds. They want proof of acquisition. They want confirmation that your activity is legal, compliant, and aligned with your tax residency. Without a structure, you're walking in alone, exposed and vulnerable. With a structure, the entity, not you, is making the movement. And banks work with entities the same way they work with businesses. It's familiar, it's documented, and it's normal. Now imagine XRP becomes widely used as a settlement bridge between institutions. Your XRP holdings are no longer viewed as speculative. They're viewed as part of the same liquidity ecosystem that banks rely on. Regulators take that seriously. They want clarity, they want reporting, they want control, and that's exactly when governments start asking questions that most XRP holders aren't prepared to answer. Who owns the wallet? How was the XRP acquired? What is the purpose of this movement? Why was it transferred to this address? What is the economic intent behind this transaction? These are questions wealthy individuals never have to answer personally because their structures answer for them. But if you're in your personal name, every question is directed straight at you. And every answer becomes part of a permanent record that follows you for life. And this is where the second big shift comes in: inheritance. People forget that digital assets don't automatically transfer to heirs in a legal way. If your XRP is held personally, your heirs inherit not just the asset, but the tax obligation, the reporting obligation, and the regulatory exposure attached to it. A proper structure eliminates that problem. It creates continuity. It creates clarity. It removes ambiguity. Most importantly, it ensures your XRP doesn't become a legal mess after you're gone. This isn't about fear. This is about understanding the direction the world is moving. XRP is positioning itself to become part of the financial architecture that governments rely on. Once your asset becomes part of that architecture, the rules of the game change, and the holders who fail to adapt get caught in systems they never prepared for. And that's exactly why we need to go even deeper, because what's coming next in this transformation will affect every XRP holder in ways they haven't even considered yet. This is not financial advice. As we move deeper into this transformation, something becomes very clear. The world that early crypto adopters imagined, a world of anonymity, independence, and sovereignty, is being replaced with a world of integration, oversight, and classification. That's not a conspiracy. That's simply what happens when technology grows from an experiment into an essential financial pillar. XRP is at the center of that pivot because it is the first digital asset being positioned not as a speculative coin, but as infrastructure. Once something becomes infrastructure, governments don't just regulate it, they embed it into their systems. And when that happens, holders must operate with the same seriousness as institutions, not retail traders. This is why the next 5 years are not going to resemble the last 5. The people who thrive in the coming era will be the ones who understand that crypto is entering its institutional maturity phase, where financial rules catch up with blockchain technology. This isn't theory. We're already watching institutions adjust their internal models to a world where digital assets are not optional tools, but mandatory components in global liquidity flows. Those same models, however, come with strict compliance requirements, reporting expectations, and tax obligations that ripple outward to every participant in the ecosystem, including retail holders. And the truth is, most people are not ready for what that looks like. They think they are because they have a ledger. They think they are because they avoid centralized exchanges. They think they are because they move their coins through multiple wallets. But none of those actions change how governments treat the person. None of those actions create legal distance between you and the asset. None of those actions solve the real problem: classification. When regulators classify your holdings incorrectly, you enter a world of legal burdens that can last years. Mistakes become liabilities. Missing documentation becomes a permanent issue. Unregistered wallets become red flags that never disappear. The goal is not to hide. The goal is to avoid unnecessary exposure. And people forget that regulatory exposure is not about wrongdoing. It's about misunderstanding. Most crypto holders won't get in trouble because they're doing something illegal. They'll get in trouble because they don't know how to speak the language of a regulated global system. This is exactly why high net worth individuals approach crypto differently. They treat it the same way they treat real estate, stocks, or business ownership, with structures, professionals, and legal distance. Not to avoid taxes, but to avoid chaos. Because chaos is what happens when governments legally require documentation you can't produce. Chaos is what happens when a bank freezes your funds until you produce certified ownership proof. Chaos is what happens when regulators label your holdings as unreported assets, even if you believed you were fully compliant. We're moving into an era where XRP will become visible at levels we've never seen before. Imagine what happens when the XRP ledger becomes a global settlement layer for cross-border payments, institutional remittances, and liquidity bridging across currencies. Every move on that ledger becomes part of a system that governments view as financial infrastructure, and financial infrastructure comes with auditing, compliance, and transparency, whether you like it or not. Now think about what that means for retail investors. When your XRP sits in a personal wallet under your name with no legal structure in between, you are the single responsible entity for every action on that wallet. That means the government can ask you to explain transactions from years ago, and you must answer. That means international tax agencies can request documentation, and you must provide it. That means your heirs inherit not just the asset, but all obligations attached to it, unless you planned ahead. This is why wealthy individuals take the extra step of creating shields, not digital shields, legal shields, structures that classify assets correctly, reduce liability, and create a buffer between them and the ever-tightening global financial grid. Once you understand how governments are moving, you realize this is not paranoia. This is preparation. And here's something most people don't realize. The more valuable XRP becomes, the more scrutiny holders will face. You can get away with poor documentation when you're cashing out a few hundred. But when you attempt to off-ramp 6 figures or 7, banks stop viewing you as a hobbyist. They treat you like an institution. And institutions must meet standards. Proof of origin, legal acquisition, structured ownership, certified documentation. If you don't have those tools ready, the bank doesn't process the transaction. They freeze it. They delay it. They escalate it. This is happening everywhere, and it's accelerating. Now, imagine XRP hits its full potential. Imagine global banks route trillions through the ledger. Imagine international institutions rely on XRP liquidity for daily operations. At that point, your holdings are not crypto. They are part of a regulated global financial rail. And in that environment, the holders who protect themselves with structures will thrive, while the holders who stay exposed will face endless friction. That's why these conversations matter, because adoption isn't just about price. Adoption is about reality. Governments regulate infrastructure. XRP is becoming infrastructure. And the reality of infrastructure is that everyone participating in it, retail included, becomes part of the regulated environment surrounding it. Without preparation, without structure, without documentation, and without understanding the legal side of this transformation, many holders will discover the hard way that self-custody is only half the equation. Protecting the asset is essential, but protecting the owner is the part most people completely overlook. You can hold your XRP perfectly. You can never get hacked. You can store your seed phrase in a vault. And still, if you're unstructured, undocumented, or misclassified, you can end up in a position where your wealth becomes difficult to use, difficult to move, difficult to pass down, and difficult to protect. That's why now, before real utility, before mass institutional settlement, before governments fully tighten the net, is the time to get ahead of all of it. Because once the system is fully built, the rules are no longer optional. And once the system is fully automated, mistakes are no longer forgiven. That's the future we're stepping into, a future where XRP is everywhere. But so is the oversight. And if you're holding a meaningful amount, your number one responsibility is to make sure you're not entering that future unprotected, unprepared, or exposed. And if you take all of this seriously, then here's the final thing you should hear.